Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I'm Joel Scopelleti from Carrick Home Improvements. I'm here to hopefully share some good knowledge about experience, pros and cons. And when Alex talked to me about talking, I was excited because we all want to share and grow, and we want people, the more people building better, the better it is for everybody. Well, first thing is buying an investment. Well, Henry's going to talk a lot about it. Number one thing, when you buy a property, is you're going to have to do your, before you buy it, do your due diligence, obviously, right? Because when it comes to infill, there's a lot of times that you start off with, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but the restrictions are reality, and there's a million different types of restrictions. You're going to review through it. So that's the number one thing about buying a property is do your research before, whether it's getting a preliminary zoning review, some sort of information. You know, maybe you want to tear it down, turn it into a duplex, triplex, laneway garage. That sounds great, but it might take 2.5 years to make that happen. So, you know, you should know that. Or you might look around the neighborhood and say, hey, what's going on in the neighborhood? Is there any precedence that's happening? And that's a huge thing that you need to be aware of, because if you're going to be the first one to create a precedence, you're a trailblazer, and that's expensive and takes time. So when you're looking to purchase something, look into the neighborhood and see what precedents are around you, and believe it or not, talking to the neighbors, knock on the doors. Like, you know, are they going to be happy that a 3-story home is going to block their sun? Is it a non-starter, right? Because once you get into the property, it's too late, right? Location, right? You guys are all in real estate, and that famous time-tested location. That's been around for, it's never going to change, thousands of years, and that's never going to change. So as an infill developer, I think location is critical, because it's not, listen, money is important, but it's not so much what you pay for the house, it's what you can sell the house for. And that's where you have to be your focus on, right? Not, oh, it's a cheap property, but if there's not much you can do with it and there's no upside to that location, then I think that's important. Lot sizes, right? So when you're looking at a property, can you sever the lot? Is it big enough where I can put you know, 2 properties on it? Lot size, could I be able to have a coach home? Or you know, location of the lot, the irregular shape of the lot. So the lot size is very important as well. As you guys know in real estate, you know, I tell people all the time, I can build a house anywhere in the world, any house, doesn't matter, but your lot is your lot. I can't duplicate your lot, I can duplicate your home. So I think the lot is probably you know, one of the most critical things that you have to think about before you buy. You know, zoning information, Henry will get into that, but that's all about hey, what you want to do and what you can do, and what's realistic are not always in line. Environmental considerations, this is a big thing nowadays, because when you buy a property, and once you buy the property, it's in your hands, it's too late. So before you get to that point, you know, find out if there's going to be some brownfield that you have to deal with. Find out if there's going to be restrictions as far as some contamination in the land, because that's very expensive, time consuming, and that's the last thing you want to do. Not just a general view of before you buy, right? Before you buy. The next thing we want to talk about is the demolition process, right? So the demolition process is very, very critical. The next thing.
Yeah, you can click.
Okay. So the demolition, right? You need permits for demolition, right? But before we get into permits, when you're building a house infill, one of the most important things you have to think about is your neighbors, because they're going to make your life hell, or they can make your life quite easy, you know. And I think it boils down to general respect. You know, talk to your neighbors, let them know before you go. If you go to committee, Henry will talk about it. You need to get your neighbors on side, but that's a different situation. But now we're talking about demolition. You know, if you have machines coming and you have a big noisy demolition day, call them. Don't let the machine show up rumbling at 7:30 in the morning, waking them up. Call them on Friday and say, next Tuesday there's going to be a demolition. Maybe treat them a breakfast certificate, get them out of the house early. Because your neighbors, a situation where what I always do is first thing I talk to all the neighbors in the vicinity that are being, connected to it. I'll take a picture of the property. And I take a picture, I say them, and then I write them, I'll even write a letter saying, this picture, it will be returned back to that state or better. So that gives them peace of mind, right? Because nobody knows, there's gonna be earth on the property, material, who knows what happens. So I think they need to have that comfort. And you know what? Honestly, it's probably, if you do a good job with the neighbors, you'll get more referrals from the neighbors than you will from the homeowner, because the neighbors will appreciate the respect that you show them. So I think that's very important. When doing demolition, there's so many things that are involved, like getting into utilities. So getting back to the neighbors, all the utilities need to be cut off and disconnected and mindful, right? So you're tearing down the house, you can't have gas, you can't have electricity, you have to obviously cut all those things off. So now you're on site, what do? Well, like I said, if you have a decent relationship with your neighbor, maybe you can use their power. Maybe you pay their power bill instead of having, generators and all these things. Talk to the neighbors. Where do they want to see a porta potty washroom sitting beside their deck as they're having their lunch, right? So these are things that you have overhead wire, okay? So for example, you have a machine that's a big backhoe. Well, you know what? There's overhead wires here. You can't use that big machine. So now this project that was going to take 2.5 weeks to demo is taking 4.5 weeks. And if you have that information beforehand and you're aware, well, you know what? It's just going to make your life a lot easier and make the whole process, easier. I mean, when you're doing infill homes, it's especially in the city of Toronto, there's so many things to think about. I'm talking about the access for machineries, like I talked about, bins, parking, porta potties. These are all things, material. These are all things that you have to look at before you, if it's a row home or if it's a home that's got no parking and what do you do with all that information? How do you deal with all that? These are things that are very, very critical, because at the end of the day, you're buying the house and you're selling the house. Every cost in between comes out of your pocket, right? So if you know beforehand what you're getting into, well, the better you buy a house, the better deal you get to buy a house, the better deal you have to sell the house. And the construction costs are the costs. So you don't want to have all these delays and unnecessary calls and expenses, and especially when you have the ability to say, I'm going to choose that house. So you've got to be aware of those things, because when it's too late, it's too late. Every project when you're doing downtown, you have shoring costs, tree protection, fencing, wash. These are costs. These are soft costs that come in and just erode your profitability, right? And that's the thing that most people forget, and I'm talking from experience. Oh my God, that's $35,000 in shoring. What happened here? You know what I mean? These are things that when you go with your budget, it doesn't matter what contractor you use. I think it's very critical that you use an experienced contractor who has experience in infills, because of all these unforeseen things. But it doesn't matter, because nobody can see behind walls. Nobody knows about concrete strikes and lumber prices, and so it varies so much. And no matter what budget, and I tell all my clients this, no matter what budget, if you have $1 million to spend, you're going to tell the contractor you have $850. You got to have at least 15% on the side. Do not get into any major renovation or infill home without an additional 15%, because there will be surprises, there will be opportunities to upgrade nice things, and you need to have room, because at the end of the day, when you sell it, they're going to find out, they're going to see if it's shoddy, and they're going to see, your point is, how do you maximize your value, and that's what it's all about. Next thing is build back better. Okay, this thing's very, very critical. When you decide to build a home, If you're in a certain area, you've got to be consistent to that area. Whether it's a commercial type of area, build a commercial style building. Whether it's a Victorian type of area, you want to keep that energy consistent. And when I walk into the house, I don't want to see, skinny plank flooring and glass railings. I don't want to see Victorian style type of kitchen and have modern windows. You want to keep a theme that's consistent, right? If it's going to be a rental unit of young entrepreneurs or young professionals, then you're going to design it for what they like. If it's going to be more for older people or for multi-family generations, you want to be able to nail it down, because that's the most important thing. Because at the end of the day, when you sell that property, it's not specific. We all seen houses and projects where it stands out like a sore thumb, and it works to your detriment. So I think that's very critical, right? To be very focused, seriously focused on the specific theme and keep that consistent throughout the house. Listen, the windows today have become so much more efficient, so much better glazing. Everybody wants big glass windows, brightness, and I think that's part of what Henry will help talk to design about. But I think big, bright windows, skylights and big windows and 12-foot patio doors, and it's about wow, right? It's about wow, especially when you're flipping it. So those are more fundamental details. But I think it's very important now, build an environmentally friendly home. It's a tough situation, guys, because the more money you spend environmentally friendly, foam spray, geothermal, triple glazed windows, are you going to get the return on that dollar? As an investor and as a developer, you really won't. But what you will get a reputation, and you will get a better, higher standard. And that's what it's about. We're not here to just build one house and then you're not going to retire off one house. You're supposed to create, an ongoing, and you want to build something, build a business. And that starts off with being environmentally friendly, guys, because 50% of all the greenhouse emissions in a home come from heating and cooling. And in the next decade, that's not going to be optional. It's going to be mandatory. Where they're going to have to, better insulation, air tightness, reduce the heating costs, geothermal, heat pumps. These are reality that is coming, whether we like it or not. So let's be ahead of the curve and let's build it better. Like a net zero home. Basically, just so you guys know, a net zero home is essentially nothing more than a home that uses less energy than it takes. And there's 100 different options and combinations and things to get to that point, but that's where we're going to be. And as young builders, and that's something that I think you educate yourself, and if you can become an expert and build your homes with that in mind, you will be, it'll be better for the environment. It'll be a win-win-win situation. Build with the future in mind, right? Whether it's all smart appliances and smart type of technology, that's where we're at, right? We have the opportunity to move forward, and I think building multifamily homes, right? This is where the new laws have the city is compressed, and we're finding ways to maximize our space. So that's going back to the design that Henry will talk about, but again, I believe it's very important to, at my final point there, maximizing your space. So whether that's 3 units, whether that's a coach house, whether that's a backyard patio, whether that's kind of, you got to look at, if you look around the world and you look at some of these older cities, they don't waste any inches. Every maximum space is maximized. So we can go to larger cities around the world and get ideas from and say, hey, that's a great idea. Look at what they do here, look what they do there. And at the end of the day, when you build a house, you leave your fingerprint on it. you must believe in that, and you must be proud of what you do. And every time you build a house, it's got to be better and better and better. And that's basically that's what I'm here to talk about. Yeah, that's it really.
Thank you so much, Joel. That was really insightful. Any questions?
Yeah.
What do you see as like the best bang for your buck as far as like energy savings? Is it like spray foam? Is it heat pump? Like what are the go-to items?
Well, I would say number one, it would be air spray foam.
Right.
Okay, so spray foam would be this. You lose most of your heat in your attic, and you lose it in your basement. Your furnace is in your basement, it's generating heat, and by the time it gets all the way to the second floor or the third floor or first floor even, it's losing heat. So I think basement is super critical. There's really three things, okay? You're gonna talk about, number one is proper insulation. That's the critical. Number two is eliminate air gaps. Around the door, weather stripping, simple things, right? It's not complicated. We've all been in homes that have drafts. Block the draft. Insulate the attic. Homes that are in Toronto have, how many guys have, throughout your life, have your parents updated your insulation in your attic? Is that even a thought? Heat rises, right? So, so you have your simple things like foam spray, insulation, attics, seal all the gaps, but then you're getting into to geothermal, and now you're getting into more complicated things. And I think that the key, what it is to creating solar panels. I think we have to get over the look, and we have to remember that we're able to grab energy for free. And if we can grab energy, this is what net zero is all about. It's about utilizing energy that we have and utilizing less energy that we use. By bigger windows, we need less lights. By having smart appliances, you can have your lights on, all that stuff on timers. By doing rainwater recovery, like you think about how ridiculous it is. We have all this rain that comes down. What do we do with it? Rain. This is like in the future. Why don't we harvest that water? Use it to water our grass. Use it for our toilets. This is free stuff that nature is giving us, and we can't afford to do that anymore. We need to become more conscious, and basically what it means is use less energy and maximize the energy and the resources that God gives us. So yeah.
Thank you.
Before building, are you usually doing soil samples on that?
Well, before you buy, right?
Before you
buy, that's what I would say, right? Before I buy, if you're selling the property, and I'm going to say, well, I need an environmental assessment of this land, and that's part of my condition, right?
The purchase agreement, okay.
Yeah, because once I buy it, I own it, and then, it's just like time, right? Time and money. This is what it's about. Planning, and anything you do, it's all about planning. Mm-hmm. So the more you're able to be aware of the pitfalls before you start, when the pitfalls happen, you're prepared, right? Like everybody says to me, why does it take a year? Why does it take so long to infill? It's a good question. It's a good question, because it really, technically, in a perfect world, it shouldn't, but we don't live in a perfect world. So we have to be aware of the pitfalls and be ready and have the financing to handle them, because it's the real world.
Say you want to be like a landlord and hold long-term rental properties, and you have invested in these like environmentally friendly things that lower your utilities. Would you then charge rent with the utilities included, or have the tenants pay for the utilities?
Well, you see, that's a good question. That's a really good question, because I find that when somebody pays out of their pocket, they're more conscious of it. When it's all included, then they don't have the same consciousness of turning lights on and being careful and stuff like that. But what I will say, you bring up a good point. What I will say, it's about value, okay? So if my plumber has a toilet that's a $200 toilet from American Standard or a $600 toilet from Kohler, my labor doesn't change, right? My hardwood floors or whatever, if it's a $3 hardwood floor or a $7 hardwood floor, my labor doesn't change. So especially when you're doing a rental, or even, especially for anything, but even more for a rental, you are going to, the more better quality material you use, the more value you get. Because your labor costs are equal to high or low end material, but your lifeline of that material is double, triple, and then some. So that's another thing to really think about. It's not just about how cheap is this, it's how does this wear? Because if I'm paying the same money to put a light fixture that's $10 or $100, well, you know, now that's a tough example because sometimes they have 100 different points, and that's a different, you know. But at the end of the day, you're paying for your labor and your material. So the better quality material you use, the less you'll have to change it.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe.
Okay.